LeadMN World Headquarters, I'm Mike Dean. The COVID-19 pandemic has closed down community and technical college campuses across Minnesota and moved all classes online. A survey of more than 5,000 students found that they're struggling with the disruptions to school and jobs caused by the pandemic. The survey found that 42% are experiencing higher level of anxiety, depression, or stress, 31% have been laid off or had their hours reduced, and 13% are considering dropping a course. LeadMN recommended that campuses support students by 1. Providing additional advising to students struggling with online courses, 2. Distributing information on unemployment insurance, and 3. Addressing mental health challenges. As a result of the survey, LeadMN provided over $5,000 in emergency grants to students over the last several weeks, and now the federal government will provide $27 million to support Minnesota community and technical college students impacted by the pandemic. With the outbreak of COVID-19, the annual gathering of community and technical college students has moved online. Hundreds of students from across Minnesota will gather on Zoom for the first eSpring General Assembly this Friday. The students are part of the organization LeadMN, who are college students connecting for change. For over 20 years, LeadMN has empowered students to have their voice heard in the Minnesota State System Office, the halls of the state capitol, and on the Hill in Washington, D.C. While the COVID-19 is keeping students apart, they will come together to elect new student leadership, approve the steering committee recommendations, and set the LeadMN budget for the next year. Before they do that, though, they're going to have to learn how to Zoom. All right, is this on? Welcome to day 35 of the quarantine. We're still adjusting to the new reality where you can't tell what day of the week it is. One thing we've had to learn over the last several weeks is how to Zoom. While this four-letter word can be a curse to some, we wanted to lay out some tips to help you be a Zoom expert. Tip number 1, good lighting. Be sure to not have your lighting behind you, otherwise people will think you're in the witness protection program. And be sure not to have the light directly in your face so that people think you're being interrogated by the CIA. Tip 2, be sure to unmute yourself. New technology can be hard to adapt to. The hardest part in Zoom is going back and forth between muting yourself so that participants don't have to hear what's going on behind you, and unmuting yourself so that they can hear when you want to speak. Just press spacebar when you want to speak. Tip 3, find the right background. The great part of being in Zoom is that you can change your background to hide the fact that you've not cleaned your house in 3 weeks. By going under video settings, you can change your background to be anything from the beach to your hoard of toilet paper to the office in the office. Tip 4, guest appearances are okay. Guests may unexpectedly jump on a Zoom call. No, they aren't exactly Zoom bombing. This could be our roommates, both human and pet. Remember, your pets are just to remind you who is boss. Now that everyone is Zooming, we can go into our next segment we call Good Question. Students gather throughout the year for conferences, go up to the Capitol lobby, and pay a student fee that supports LeadMN. So you're probably asking, what is LeadMN? Our Liz Block looks into this question.
Located on South Robert Street in West St. Paul sits a rather inconspicuous building. This is where change happens. Launched in 1998, LeadMN was formed to advocate for community and technical colleges. At the time, it was called the Minnesota State College Student Association. But a few years ago, they changed their name to make it easier to say and reflect what the organization does. College students connecting for change. At the time it was created, there were some that opposed the idea of giving students a voice because it might disrupt the status quo in higher education. And boy, were they right. At LeadMN, we like to say that you should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Over the years, LeadMN has been able to do so much with the power of student leadership. Things such as saving students hundreds of dollars by advocating for lower tuition. We passed transfer reforms, making it easier for college students to transfer to a 4-year state school. We led the fight to address racial inequities in higher education and fought to lower the cost of textbooks. We guaranteed the right for students to have a voice in campus decisions. We also led the nation in youth voter turnout in 2018 and passed the Hunger-Free Campus Act. Each year, students take on some long-standing issues as well as some new ones, as they carry the torch to create change for community and technical college students. What change will you create next year? Now that is a good question.
Thank you, Liz. This Friday, 12 new colleges will be designated as hunger-free campuses by LeadMN. They will join Anoka Tech, Central Lakes, Inver Hills, and South Central colleges. This award was created by the Minnesota State Legislature last year to recognize community colleges that take 5 key steps to address food insecurity on campus, from creating a food pantry to supporting students with emergency grants. This legislation was a direct result of student advocacy efforts at the Capitol, and research this year shows that food insecurity is an issue that 2 in 5 community college students face in Minnesota. The report highlights some recommendations that students can bring forward during the 2021 legislative session to ensure that students' basic needs are being met on campus. The COVID-19 pandemic has put a spotlight on these problems facing community technical college students and should create a renewed sense of urgency to tackle these issues next year. I'm just getting word now that the President is holding a live press conference. Let's go live for today's presidential briefing.
Good morning, LeadMN. While these are dark days for many college students, please note that I am fighting hard at the system office to ensure that students get a fair deal. Whether that is keeping student workers employed, keeping campuses open so that students can access critical resources, or advocating for student refund for those that wish to withdraw from classes. While we don't know what the future holds, I will be here protecting students and making sure that you get emergency support. I had a perfect call with the chancellor last week where I told him that students need emergency grant now to support the 1 in 3 students that have lost their job because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I have heard a perfect phone call with the student and the system. Those calls are perfect, and there are no other president had a perfect call like that before at LeadMN. It was perfect because I was talking with the student and the system. While the pandemic cut short many of the things that we wanted to do this year, it did not stop us from achieving so much. To the thousands of students that are graduating, I want to say congratulations. But I also want to say congratulations to the campuses that are designated as hunger-free campuses. LeadMN is finally winning again. We brought together students and staff for a system-wide basic need committee that will continue to identify policy changes to improve student mental health, addressing housing and food insecurity. This past October, Governor Wall declared October 25th as College Food Insecurity Awareness Day. We push hard on improving the transfer pathway process by identifying new pathway that students can take and working with legislators to introduce legislation to expand pathway option for students. And this year, for the first time, the cabinet visited the White House during our Washington, D.C. trip. The president was too busy golfing to meet with us.
We're going to cut back in here with some important election news. Welcome to Decision 2020, where you decide the next student leaders for LeadMN. On Friday, April 24th, students from across Minnesota will participate in the first ever virtual General Assembly. The first election will be for LeadMN president. This individual acts as the official representative of LeadMN with the chancellor and meets with the board of trustees and at the state capitol. The next election is for vice president, who coordinates all advocacy efforts for LeadMN and the Get Out the Vote effort. Then the public relations coordinator election will be held. They coordinate communication with campuses, manages the Star Campus program, and chairs the scholarship board. And finally, the treasurer election. This position ensures the overall financial security of LeadMN and the chairs the fiscal committee. All voting will take place via a secure website that voters will be directed to from an email. After each election, the person with the lowest vote tally will be dropped from the ballot until an individual receives a majority of the votes.